We are fortunate, I think, to have Mike Trojan here to talk about stormwater today. And judging by the turnout, I think a lot of people would agree. Mike has had as you know, Mike has had a long and storied career here at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. I know Mike from way back in graduate school, actually, and it's always been a pleasure to work with Mike. It's always been great source of great expertise on things water related. After working at the DNR for a while, he came to PCA, where he's worked in the remediation section, and then ambient groundwater research, and more recently working on stormwater. And today he's going to be telling us about Minnesota Stormwater Wiki, lessons learned after only 15 million hits so far, something like that. So take it away, Mike.
You know, when you volunteer to do these talks 3 months in advance, you think the day is never going to come. And, well, here it is. So Bill Dunn sent me an email saying, how many of those 15 million hits are because of me? So first thing I did is I took it out of my title because it does seem a little arrogant. It really wasn't intended to be an arrogant remark. But in fact, we have 15 million, as of 11 o'clock yesterday morning, we have 15,399,308 hits, 38,378,000 edits, or 0.25% edits. So, wow, not too bad. That's about 15.2 million more hits than I expected to get when we did this. How many have been to the stormwater? Not as many as maybe I might have expected. So I have to do the obligatory acknowledgements, and I'm always reluctant to do this because there's so many people that aren't on here that should be on here, but you can't list everybody. But the Minute folks were instrumental in getting the wiki up and keeping it maintained for the last 5 years that we've had it. W.A. Fisher was our contractor, and I'll talk a little bit about what the contract work was for this project. Many people in stormwater that have been involved, Annie and Rachel and Caroline and others that have contributed to the site. Paul Legard, who's now retired, and Ann Gelman, who will be retiring soon, have been there the whole time and been really instrumental in populating it and keeping the wiki fresh, keeping new ideas coming and so forth. We had external folks help us design the wiki and populate it, and then there's a lot of other folks that are just. So the original manual, as Brian knows, was an 854-page document, and it was done in 2005. And at the time, it was considered to be the leading manual in the United States. That's because it was only one of 2 manuals. But also because it really was advanced the concepts of lid and cold climate management, which at the time were pretty revolutionary. But stormwater has continued to evolve. Stormwater management has continued to evolve since 2005. Since then, we see practices like tree trench systems along the Green Line in St. Paul. Desired enhanced treatment for those of you who are Costco and Maplewood, right outside the parking lot. Underground infiltration is becoming a very popular management practice. Green roofs like the one on the Target Center. And this material was either not in the original manual or very sparse in the original manual. So the question is, well, how do we keep an 854-page PDF document up to date with new information as it comes along? Fortunately, in 2011, we got some money, Clean Waterfront money, to provide updates to our guidance. And for us, we interpreted that to mean primarily our Minnesota Stormwater Manual, which was our primary tool, or guidance tool that we had in our program at the time. So the first task was to identify a platform for this guidance. We knew there'd be significant new information going into the manual, the stuff I just showed, plus lots of other things that have been happening in the world. And we proposed a web-based portal in which there were multiple PDF documents dealing with these topics. So instead of a single 854-page document, we'd have multiple PDFs, which would be easier to navigate. Many folks said, no, that would be a nightmare to manage. So they proposed a wiki. And Jason Ebert was the Frankenstein of the wiki Stormwater Manual. If there's a Jason's not here, so I can say that. Why wiki? It's really easy to manage many web pages in a wiki, and I'll show some of that in a little bit here. It has very powerful search capabilities. Linking, for those of you, I'm sure you all use Wikipedia, it's really easy to move around in Wikipedia, and we've kind of learned that as we've gone as one of the lessons learned that I'll be talking about. It's ADA compliant, accessible, and it allowed our program to actually manage our website, which is a huge bonus. I'll talk a little bit about that too as one of the lessons learned. So what is a wiki? It's a type of web content management system, much like Drupal or Joomla. I think the agency's on Drupal, I'm not sure of that. So it's just a content management system. But it runs on open source, and we use MediaWiki. So that makes it nice, because we don't have to pay anything for it, plus it gets updated frequently. The content is actually stored in the database. And so we have over 1,500 pages of material, web pages, individual web pages of material in the wiki right now, plus well over 1,000 figures and so forth. And you think, well, how can you manage something that large? Well, it's in a database, so it really isn't a space issue. A wiki is a non-linear thing, so think of it as putting 1,500 pages up on the board, up on the wall, and you can connect, manipulate, move those pages around in any fashion that you want. For example, if you have 4 wiki pages here, I could take wiki pages 1 and 2 and combine them on wiki page 5 just simply by putting in a code on wiki page 5 that says go and grab the content of 1 and 2 and stick it here. And that's a really nice feature. And you can embed material, and I'll show an example of that here in a bit. It also allows us to have a lot of summary information, and that's another advantage of the wiki too. And we can provide these monster technical documents somewhere else in the wiki and have little fact sheets that connect those together. So it makes it really easy for people to get to the material that they want. It's really easy to use, simple markup. Of course, if I can use it, anybody can use it. And one thing, though, is unlike other wikis, the MPCH is not open to everyone. A number of staff are allowed to go in and work in it, but other than that, people are not allowed to get into the wiki. This is an example of one of the real advantages of the wiki. You can take, if you have a page here, page A, you can take what's on page B and just stick it in to page A. This table, which is a really important table, if you're designing a stormwater practice, you need to know what your soils are, so it'll allow you to determine how much water you can put into this practice. This page is used 16 times in the manual, but it only exists on one page. So we basically, through coding, can insert that page anywhere in the manual. Whenever this page gets updated, we update this page, it automatically gets updated in 16 places in the manual. That's a really nice feature. And as I said, we have more than 1,500 pages in the wiki. So we contracted with W.A. Fisher, for those boundary water folks that are in the audience. This is the Fisher of the Fisher Boundary Water Maps. Their job was to develop website templates, populated with 10% of the original manual material, make sure that we had a functionally complete website at the end of the project. Give our staff some training that included PCA, stormwater, and our minute staff. We've had tremendous minute support throughout this project. And it cost about $25,000. It took 3 months to develop, and it took us about 2 months to migrate the information into the wiki. Once the content was migrated, we began using legacy money to update it. Some examples of new sections. And a section would be, say, if we had a new section on tree trenches, and we do have a new section on tree trenches. that would include maybe 10 to 15 separate pages associated just with that topic. So each of these new sections has multiple pages associated with it. So new sections that were added were sections on green roofs, trees, iron-enhanced treatments, permeable pavement, harvested use, reuse. None of these were really in the original manual, so they've been added. So that's a lot of information, probably the equivalent of 40 to 50 separate web pages or more maybe. We have separate new pages in the manual, determining soil infiltration rates, interpreting water borings, pollinator-friendly practices, information on plants, and so forth and so on. And many sections were updated. So we've done a lot of work. We probably more than doubled the original manual. If it was in a document now, I probably wouldn't be able to carry it up here. Well, at my age, there's a lot of things I can't carry. So what? I mean, that's all great. So how do we measure success? Well, as I said, we've had over 15 million hits, and you can see the number of hits per day continues to go up. So it's not a kind of a flash in the pan kind of thing. People are continuing to use it and using it more and more. And the manual itself is becoming more and more diverse, which is one of the lessons I think learned too that I'll talk about. It is cited nationally and internationally. Here's some examples of other websites where the manual is cited, referenced, and linked to. The manual platform is being used by others. For those of you who are familiar with Bowser's Public Drainage Manual, they now have their drainage manual in Wiki format. I've received phone calls from folks around the country about how do you get something into the Wiki. Toronto, for example, is going to be putting their low impact development manual into a Wiki format. But most importantly, it's used for stormwater management. The manual is incorporated into local rules. It always has been. We get lots of phone calls and emails, references at meetings and presentations. The web searches obviously are there. And we've had some webinars, and they've been extremely well attended too. So people are really using this information. And that's really what it's all about. It's not about getting 15 million hits. It's about knowing at the end of the day that maybe we helped a couple people do the right thing. Lessons learned. So if you're in the boundary waters and it says there's a portage on the map, take it. If I remember right, we ended up going back, unloading the boat, and doing what we were supposed to do. I'm going to talk around lessons learned around 3 different topic areas. First, managing the website. So managing the content. How do you manage your content? And the reason I really wanted to give this talk is because I wanted to do something on a Thursday morning. But I also wanted to relate some of what I think is relevant to other programs. Now, not everybody's going to be working in a Wiki. In fact, none of you may end up working in a Wiki. But hopefully some of these lessons, or a lot of them, are applicable to the information that you work with and the data that you work with on a day-to-day basis. Delivering the information is a lesson we've learned is really important. And then how do we develop the information? So lesson number 1, people access information through web searches. Now, for those of you who are younger than, I don't know, 35 or 40, probably go on well, of course. But for people like me who remember mainframe computers and punch card coding and all that, you know, we were taught book format, table of contents, and so forth and so on. That's how you get people to where they want to go. That's not how people get there. Only about 3% of our hits are on the main page. We have several tables of content, or portals we call them, to other materials throughout the manual. And those don't get used as much as the pages that are in the table of contents. And I'll show an example here. We get a surprisingly low number of people asking where things are. If people were getting to places through our table of contents, I'd be getting a lot of phone calls like, where the heck is this? We don't get those. People get to these sites through Google searches. If you look at bioretention, for example, we have about 15 pages of different material, 15 different web pages associated with bioretention. So if you went to the table of contents in bioretention, this page has had about 50,000 hits. In theory, if people were using this to get to any of these pages, none of these pages could have more than 50,000 hits. The design for criteria for bioretention has about 250,000 hits on it. People aren't getting to that page with this page. They're getting to there by typing in something like bioretention design in a Google search. And the Minnesota Stormwater Manual shows up as the number 2 and 3 hits when you do a Google search on bioretention design. The lesson here, of course, is that if you want people to find your material, think Google search. So we have some ridiculous page titles. They don't make much sense at all unless you're looking for something through a Google search. High gradient stormwater step pool swale, bunch of nouns. But if you're looking for a stormwater swale, a step pool swale, a high gradient swale, any of those searches is going to get you to this site. Here's a good one. Multiple benefits of green infrastructure and role of green infrastructure in sustainability and ecosystem services. People sometimes ask me for, how do I get to your site? I mean, give me the web address for your site, and I say, just do a Google search. Just search on green infrastructure and ecosystem services, and this site is going to show up. Stormwater and rainwater harvest and use for use. Again, a bunch of nouns. Take a look at this site. Stormwater and rainwater harvest and reuse. So if I do a search on rainwater harvesting, it shows up as a number 3 site in a Google search. If I do a search on stormwater harvesting, it shows up as 3 and 4, so a couple pages show up. If I do a search on stormwater reuse, it's the number 1 and 2 hit. Rainwater reuse, the number 1 and 2. Stormwater use, 2, 3, and 4. So different combinations of these. Rainwater use, well, you can't win them all. That one doesn't show up. Lesson number 2. People really like general information. So the manual originally was an engineering document. How do you build something? How do you construct it? How do you design it? How do you maintain it? It still is. That's still the main purpose of the manual. But people really like general information. If you go to the website, main page, or any page in the manual, you'll see this left toolbar. So we have an events page. It's the 10th most hit page in our manual. There was no events stuff in the original manual. This is just what's coming down the pipe in stormwater, the stormwater world. What events are coming up? What events have happened in the past, and so forth. So really, no information specific to building, constructing, and maintaining. Funding information, that's our 22nd most hit site. The glossary is our 32nd most hit site. Response to comments, 46 sites. So we get comments on the Wiki. You submit comments at the bottom of any page. People really care how we respond to our comments. We have a what's new page, what's new in the manual, and that's the 65th most hit site. So people like general information. And what that's caused us to do over time is the manual has become much more than just this nuts and bolts guidance document. Now it's become a source of information for the stormwater community. And I'll touch on that a little bit more. People really like case studies. Case studies account for about 1.6% of our total hits pages. And in fact, the most recent case study pages that we put in the manual, since we got that money in 2011, these 3 pages on green roofs, tree trenches, and treatment trains all have more than 50,000 hits. So people really like case studies. And our case study pages, if you go to them, they're all designed the same, so they all have the same format. You can kind of see that here. Pretty short description of the project, and then some basic information about the project: how much it cost, who did the work, when it was done, and so forth and so on. What kind of treatment you might be getting, or whatever. So maybe that's a lesson that I don't have up here that we would follow too. Is if you do something like case studies, follow the same format over and over. Lesson 4: provide links, and then more links. If you go to a page in the manual, so we have a page on phosphorus and stormwater. Any place that's blue is a link. So same as Wikipedia. We have found that people really do kind of move around in the manual. And so anytime we can link to a reference like this USGS report, or to a term like eutrophication, we provide links all the time whenever we can. So provide links so people can move around. and interlink things. Again, this nonlinear format that we've got, make sure that you're connecting various pieces of information. We don't like dead ends. And keep your articles short and specific. And we learned this one kind of over time. We migrated the manual originally in, and we had these really long pages. And over time, these pages have gotten much shorter and much more specific. We actually have a page dedicated just to plants for swales. So we also have a section in our plants, which is pretty long, and we've decided over time, well, you can go to that plants page, but I want plants for swales. So now I got to strip through this entire page just to find plants for swales. So we're in the process of creating very short pages like this. And so on that original plants page, we won't get rid of it, but we'll provide links there to, well, you want a specific types of plants, well, go to this website or go to that website. Pollinator-friendly plants, for example. Understanding and interpreting soils and soil borings. So that used to be embedded in the design and construction sections of all our pages. Now we just simply have a page on that topic. And it's a really important topic. And so in those other places where it used to be embedded, we now basically just point people to this page here. Determining soil infiltration rates. A whole page dedicated to just going out and knowing how to determine soil infiltration. This page gets 18 hits per day. This page gets 21 hits per day. Understanding soil borings gets about 668 hits a day. And this is important because if you don't know your soil, if you go out and you don't properly measure your soil and you're putting in a rain garden, you could end up with something that doesn't work. So you spent a lot of money, invested it, and just because you didn't get the right soils information, it could fail on. Okay, lesson 6. Delivering the information is more than putting it on the web. Now, we're all government employees, and we all have this, okay, I'm a government employee. And I had this notion that if you produce something, people will find it and they'll come to it. So I was really good at falling into that game of producing a report and maybe putting it on the web somewhere and telling a few people about it. And that doesn't work very well, to be honest. Communications and outreach has become critical to our program. So now we've got stormwater newsletters, blogs, in the news, stormwater manual webinars, videos, training and workshop, and so forth. And this is actually hopefully increasing in focus as time has gone on. This webinar, Bioretention from the Ground Up, had about 200 attendees. We had one fairly recently on phosphorus, and that one had about 300 attendees. So people are making this information accessible to people is really, really important. And so now, anytime we create anything new, we ask ourselves, who is the audience? Is this material important to them? And then if we produce the information, how are we going to get it to them? So identify the audience and then figure out how you're going to get the information to them. Just sticking it in a report will get to some of them, but it's not going to get to all the people that you want to get it to. Unfortunately, we don't have real good metrics for measuring how we do have the number of hits on the manual. Well, we have no illusions that 15 million people have come into the manual and found what they were looking for, some percentage of that. But the fact is, 15 million people have come into the manual. And so many of them are probably disappointed, but most of them we hope are not. So it would be nice if we could develop some metrics for exactly how we're getting out performance. Lesson 7, the Wiki has partly become driven by the needs of the stormwater community. And I'll explain this a little bit. We have a page called Stormwater and Landscape Guidance for Solar Farms and Solar Projects. My supervisor, I think it was my supervisor, came to me and said, we're having some issues with stormwater management and solar at these sites, solar farm sites. Sites are starting to pop up. and we're not sure if we should be doing stormwater management at these sites, or if we should be, what kind of management we should be doing. This was never even in our minds until this issue came up in reality, in the real world. And a month later, I worked with Todd Smith, and I think with Mike to some extent. A month later, we had developed this page on guidance for that. So it was completely in response to a need that had come up. We never envisioned creating this page. The same thing for liners for stormwater management. There was some information buried in there, but I get a call from some folks saying, I've got this site here, and they don't know what kind of liner to use, blah, blah, blah. And so I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll create a page in the manual on liners. 2 days later, we had a page on liners in stormwater management. So again, no intention of creating this page. It popped up in response to a need. Same for alleviating compaction from construction activities. I got a call from Les Everett at the University of Minnesota saying, you know, you've got some stuff in the manual. It's really hard to find. It's not very well organized. And so a couple weeks later, we had this site, and it's a pretty widely used site. And we're currently working on green infrastructure for stormwater management, which is a really, for those of you who are into green infrastructure, sustainability, and all of that, this is kind of the way the stormwater world is going and will go in the future. Not just stormwater, but just the world in general. With 7 billion people in the world, we have to find a way to become more sustainable. So. Lesson 8, the Wiki has allowed the stormwater program to own, create, and update information. This is important too. We had 8 staff until a couple of them defected. But when we get new staff on board, they don't have rights too. So we have 8 people working in the Wiki, and I'm always bugging our management, saying we got to get people involved in the Wiki. It shouldn't be just me. We get people involved in the Wiki. Everybody has different ideas. Everybody has different work needs, different work experiences. Get them involved, and what that does is it really fosters ownership and creativity. And so we get some really neat stuff coming into the manual that I would have never thought of, like this MS4 digital document library that Caroline Fed put together. So we heard from MS4 permittees, well, we're not sure about how to comply with the permit and the minimal control measures and so forth and so on. And so Caroline put together this document library where there's case studies and fact sheets and so forth and so on, and on all the minimum control measures. And as a package, we're getting about 110 hits a day on this information. I would have never thought of it. Caroline thought of it. She works with the permittees. This page wouldn't exist if I was the only one working on it. So the fact that the program owns this information really has led to the manual becoming much more diverse. It also gives us the ability to instantly create and update communication. I've had several calls from folks saying, why isn't this in the manual? And I say, well, can you explain a little bit more to me? And then after about a minute of talking to them, I'll tell them it's in the manual because I'll be working on it at the same time I'm talking to them on the phone. So it doesn't happen with everything. Lesson 9, don't reinvent the wheel. We have a page on pollinator-friendly best management practices for stormwater management. We have created no new content for this page. It's nothing but a series of links. And why would we want to create it? We're not the experts in the stormwater program on pollinator-friendly plants. These folks are. So what we can do is we can organize the links. So again, remember, links are more links. We can organize it so that if you're looking for pollinator-friendly plants, you would go to these pages. If you're looking for pollinator-friendly practices, you would go to these pages. Case studies, you would go to these pages. But there's no new material here. There are people that know this topic better than us, and there's no reason for us to waste our time trying to do something that would be half as good as what they've already done. This page has more than 6,000. And it's fairly newly created. So we live in an information age. It's about delivering good information to people doing on-the-ground work. So if we go to this page, operation and maintenance of stormwater infiltration practices, Maintenance is really a big deal. We're finding a lot of our stormwater practices are not working like we thought they were, and a lot of times because they're not properly maintained. Chesapeake Stormwater Network has got this tremendous tool, PowerPoint presentation and a video webcast. It does a tremendous job of instructing people how to go out and inspect and maintain their practices. So why would we want to do something like that? Why not just link to them? And we do put a caveat in there saying, you know, not everything that you see here is applicable to Minnesota. But again, the information is out there already. Go to that. Another example on the Stormwater MS4 page is, check it out. It says, go to this link if you want to see how one city addressed the issue of pet waste. So again, all this information is out there. I probably spend as much time looking for other information and websites as I do actually working and creating new information. Not everything is beer and pretzels. There are some cautions and drawbacks. The wiki is only recommended when you have content that will change. If you have static information, the wiki is not a format that you want. Managing everything can be complicated. I got 1,500 pages. It's not that a person has to be technically real strong, but you do kind of need to know what is on these 1,500 pages. If you really want the manual to be, in this case, the tool, whatever tool it is you're working with. If you want it to be dynamic, interactive, well linked, you got to kind of understand the entire system. You can manage you have to manage expectations. We didn't get too many phone calls about updating this because you really can't update something like this. I get phone calls all the time now. Can you do this? And can you do that? Can you do it by tomorrow? And the answer more often than not is, well, maybe, but not right now. So it's a good thing. It's good that people have come to recognize that we can update things on the fly, but you got to kind of manage expectations. You do need to establish quality control. You can't. We have 8 staff, as I mentioned, working in it. When we sit down with those staff, we make it clear to them that we don't put junk in the manual. It gets peer reviewed. One nice thing about the wiki is you can trace every single edit that's ever been made. So if I go in and somebody puts something in, like I'm selling an aquarium for $500, call me at this number, I can find out who did that and go talk to them. So, but we have a for a manual, it's not literature peer review rigorous, but it's a fairly rigorous process for getting stuff into the manual. I like to think that it's a high quality document, it's not filled with junk. And we do have QA/QC procedures, guidance, and help information for how to format things and styles and all that. And that's it. Any questions, comments? Applications to your program, I'd like to hear.
I assume you can't put proprietary design information in there.
We can reluctantly. We always qualify it by saying we're not endorsing right? Tree trenches, for example, it's pretty hard to put information on tree trenches without talking about the Cornell tree system or the deep roots. I can't remember that name. Proprietary practices they have. So you can't, in some cases, you can't help but mention names, and in those cases, you have to qualify by saying the agency is not endorsing.
Do you ever run into a situation, so I imagine that the wiki stuff, it's a lot of recommendations for what you need to do for stormwater?
It is guidance stuff.
It's a guidance, but oftentimes, you know, in the wastewater program, things we say that are guidance, and people interpret them like as if they're rule, and then, you know, they get mad at us, and it's, you know, so have you had any issues where people have interpreted this guidance as like a rule, and they feel like they have to do it a certain way? And
the short answer is yes. It's a little more complicated than that. We do in the manual, wherever we're linked to a permit requirement, we have these red alert boxes. So we'll always call out things that are required. And we've got yellow, green, and blue alert boxes for things that are recommended. And so we try to make that distinction there. But then, yeah, there are always questions about, well, the manual says this, and we say, well, it's just guidance, but keep in mind that we think it's the proper guidance. So you can't, I don't know how you can really get around that issue. I don't know if that answers your question.
Going back to the original build of the wiki, you talked about three months and $25,000. Is that something you think is scalable depending on the size of a particular program? Like, would it have taken much longer or shorter if we were going to do it today with this program?
We made one mistake when we did the wiki. We should have called it PCA Wiki instead of Stormwater Wiki. Because if any program, Bowser, for example, is using our wiki. And so when in their title it says Stormwater. And it would be better if it said PCA. So what I'm getting at is we have a wiki, PCA has a wiki right now, and it's already built, and it can be used by any program at this point in time. But it's got the Stormwater label attached to it. If you were to build your own wiki at this point, I think with the lessons learned, we probably could save a fair amount of time and money. I didn't know what a wiki was at the time, and coding and all that kind of stuff, so we had to kind of get around that. Now we've had some expertise in-house that I think we could really speed the process. It took us 2 months to get that stuff in. It probably would take us 2 weeks to get it in now.
So I think I just heard you say that the upfront construction of the wiki is not necessary for other programs to construct or to create a wiki. But there are ongoing costs, and you mentioned 8 people. What percentage of their time relative to a full-time?
I'm fully funded for supporting guidance, and that's primarily the manual. So my all the funding that I get from these goes to that. I think for the other staff, and I can't answer, but I don't know if it's written in the work plans.
It is. It's a small percentage, depending on if there's new work that has to go into it. Like if we have a new work order and the contractor finishes the work and then we enter it in, at that time it's more time. You know, it takes a lot more time. But for me, I've probably been spending maybe 10 to 15% of my time on working in the wiki.
It brings up an interesting point, though, because I've really tried to impress upon our management that it's not that working in the wiki, it's that we should be working in the wiki. It shouldn't be looked at as something separate. I'm trying to really get our program to realize that stormwater management goes beyond just writing permits. You have to do outreach, you have to give them tools and so forth, and the wiki is really a powerful tool for doing that. And so I'm trying to get folks to think, not in terms of I'm spending time on the wiki, but I'm doing my job and I'm using the wiki to do my job.
So are you saying that everyone in the stormwater program should have access to change the wiki?
Maybe not everybody, but those who are inclined to be interested in working in the wiki. I think anybody who sees how the wiki can help them do the work should be allowed to work.
Hi, could you explain to the group how Minute is involved and what their role is in helping maintain the wiki?
Yeah, they make sure that the platform keeps running, and so they're the media wiki people. This runs on media wiki, and so if there's an update to media wiki, or if we're having a problem with the website or whatever, then we need Minute support for that. So we do all the programming and the web page creation and so forth. But anytime there's kind of a structural, nuts and bolts kind of an issue with the platform and the software that's running on, then we need minutes help. And Sheen, who helps us, has been fantastic, and I asked her about how much of her time is spent on it, and it's 5% or less. So it really is a pretty low investment. Wiki is really pretty slick. We have a couple problems occasionally with our server, and that's when John Abbott comes into the picture. But really, the minute support is not. And I think if it was a big drain on minutes, I don't think we'd be getting the support that we're getting.
So why can't you change the name?
That would be a question you could ask Minute, I suppose. Yeah, that's a good question. One of the problems it would create for us in the stormwater program is that people who have links to these websites would lose those links probably.
How do you manage, you do links to links, you're making a decision on what content is good for. Somebody else changes their state that you link to. I could see this being a time thing with regards to management.
It is, but it is with anything. Any document that's got links in it, it's, you know, and there are some diagnostics that'll help us find bad links, but more often than not, we go into these sites and we find out that we have a bad link. And that's what you're getting at, a bad link.
Yeah, well, it's not just a link dive, but the content may change from what your intended purpose was.
Yeah. And that, you know, that kind of gets at that expectations thing that I mentioned, because if you have a static PDF document that maybe has links in it, you're never going to go in, well, almost never going to go in and update that document with links. So, but now that we have the ability to do that, I think people expect us to do it a lot. And so we certainly do it more than you can do it in a PDF document, but there's no way to keep up. I mean, there are probably tens of thousands of external links in this manual. And we can do diagnostics to check on them, and like I said, more often than not, when we're on a page and we're updating, whenever we update a page, we'll check all the links out. So that's kind of how we find things.
Make sure that there aren't any questions from the region. We have a comment here saying, "Nice job, great visuals and narrative." For David.
Well, you know, when you put Glacier National Park,
It's a win.
I'd like to hear if anybody has any thoughts about anything that I said that relates to their program. There's a couple more questions.
Well, I was just going to ask, where can we access this wiki? Is it on the CA page, or do we have to Google search it, or is it a website of the
You weren't paying attention.
department?
Type in Minnesota Stormwater Manual.
Yep, got it.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
There's a link to it on our stormwater page too. On Wikipedia.
Yeah, just type in Minnesota Stormwater Manual.
Good. I'm a believer in talking about your successes, and I think you should talk about your success to the LCCMAR who provided the seed money for this, and I just wonder if that has happened. And if it's happened once, it should probably happen more than once.
That's a good point. And I'll talk to our management about that. I think
Because LCCMAR looks at projects from PPA every year, and if they had the impression, like everyone does, this is an incredible success, and the leverage that they provided, tiny, and the leverage is huge. I think that would serve us all well.
that's a good point. I think we do have to report to Clean Water Council here next month. So, but we should be talking about outreach to our audience, but there's also outreach to folks like LCCMR.
Don't pick on them, though.
Anybody have any thoughts about anything that might be applicable to their program? I mean, like I said, not everybody can work in a wiki, but hopefully some of this stuff is applicable to other programs.
I I have one thought. So I'm in remediation, and I had a site that was actually a brownfield site, and they're going to, as part of that, they were going to put in 2 infiltration basins. And they're asking me, like, what the requirements are for that. And I said, well, that's not my area. You need to work with stormwater folks even. So just maybe making that connection a little bit might be helpful.
Yeah, we did work with Rebecca Higgins, Jamie Walsh, to create some pages in manual on infiltration and sites that have contamination or potential contamination. So that's a good example of a collaborative effort that we had. Hopefully, they're steering people to that site.
Well, it's good, yeah, because I wasn't aware of it. So
Go into
Google.
I
can. Yeah, great. I didn't really know where to go.
So if we do think our program benefits from Wiki, what do you recommend as a first step?
It's really tough because I've had several folks at PTA request that, and it's tough to get things through Minute. They're busy with Tempo, and I'm not sure, to be honest with you, I'm not sure it can be done at the staff or program level. It might take, maybe it would, somehow the agency would see a need for this. We were really lucky when we got this tune. For those of you who remember Bruce Weiser, worked in the commissioner's office at the time, and he was championing for this. And Bruce hadn't been on board at the time, it wouldn't have happened, the project wouldn't have happened. But he pushed it through. So I don't have a real good answer for you. You can always check with Matt. But maybe it's a bigger strategic effort if the agency does value this format in some of the programs. Maybe it takes multiple.
Do you see a PTA Wiki in the future, or is the agency, both the agency website and the PTA Wiki?
I'd love to see that. Paul Legard, when he was here, kind of had that vision and advanced the idea, but it didn't really go anywhere, unfortunately. Just saying a wiki, though, I think you really have to define exactly what it is you want. But personally, of course, since I work in the tool now, I'm a convert to it. I think it's great. I think there's probably many programs your agency have that.
My question about the LCC-MOR and how tooting your horn to them was partly directed at, okay, can they fund the next wiki for the PTA? That's where I was going. Maybe you just need money to give to them.
Right.
Well, and that's why, our Minute staff could have put the wiki together, but they didn't have the time and resources at the time, so that's why we ended up contracting with it. We were lucky enough to have the money to do it. Well, thank you for coming. Hopefully, you learned something today.
Thanks, Mike.